Cool. Well, welcome everyone to the July community call. I had to think about that for a second. Yeah, just as a reminder, we've posted the agenda in the discussions tab. I'll post it again for everyone's reference. So that's our current agenda. We'll kind of jump right into it. And we'll first start off with Sydney with some updates around PS Resource Get and a public bug bash.
Sure. So hopefully many of you have seen that we have done our first beta release of PS Resource Get. For those of you who maybe haven't followed the news, PS Resource Get is a continuation of the PowerShell Get 3.0 project. We are coming up very, very soon with the next preview of PS Resource Get. This could be the last preview before we RC. Some updates that I can think of that will be in this preview will be we fixed publish support for all of the v3 repositories that we support. We hooked up the credential persistence provider with publish support. We added a whole bunch more error messages and kind of fixed up a lot of our error messaging, and then there's a bunch of other sort of bug fixes in this. We're also getting in support for having pre-release dependencies for publishing and for install as well. So those are some things to look forward to in the next preview, which, as I mentioned, will be coming out very, very soon. So look out for that in the next few days. In addition, something else to note is if you are using 7.4 previews, PS Resource Get did ship in the last 7.4 preview. So if you're using 7.4, go ahead and try out PS Resource Get natively there. One last announcement and thing to note is that 1 week from today, on July 27th, we will be having our first ever live public bug bash. So this is super exciting, just a fun experiment kind of idea we had to try out with the community. So I will be hosting a live bug bash for PS Resource Get. This is kind of a chance to just try out all your scenarios. It will be kind of guided experience, but also opportunity to kind of bring in scenarios as well. We'll be doing it all together with some folks on the dev team as well. So anyone is welcome. We'll all get together on a Teams call a week from today, and this is a chance to get all your bugs filed before we move on to RC. So we hope to see many of you there. Follow on Twitter for the join link, and then I'll also be posting that in our GitHub as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat, and I will get to them as well. I think that's all I have.
Cool.
Let me add something real quick. If the bug bash turns out very successful, so I'm really hoping a lot of community support and participation. I would love to continue to do this for other new feature areas that the PowerShell team, PowerShell/OpenSSH team is investing in.
Okay. Excuse me. I'm not going to be able to mute super quickly to cough, but okay. Next item on our agenda. So feedback providers and JSON adapter demos. So if you are following us on Twitter or following our dev blogs, you've probably seen a number of new blogs being posted lately. We are publishing documentation and some blogs around this experimental feature we're calling feedback providers. So feedback providers are a way to kind of give the users feedback as you're interactively working with the PowerShell shell. I'll post a link to our blog in the chat, but I'll do a brief demo of it as well. Like I said, feedback providers, I'll share my screen and we can take a look at this. But like I said, feedback providers are a new experimental feature that was introduced in PowerShell 7.4 Preview 2 and above. And so you can enable this, of course, by enabling the experimental feature. We have a built-in feedback provider already, but feedback providers are PowerShell modules that are very similar to predictors. They trigger upon certain interactive scenarios such as errors, success, and comments that the user executes. And so feedback providers can take the information they get from errors and success in the comments and be able to provide feedback or suggestions to the users to kind of help guide them closer to kind of remediation or more information as kind of a learning tool as well as a recovery tool. We currently have a built-in feedback provider that's the command not found experimental feature. And so you may have seen this experimental feature before where you mistype a commandlet, you'll kind of get a number of suggestions of different kind of commandlets. We've just polished up the UI and made it a feedback provider so you can have a more easier, more cleaner view of the feedback. And so, you know, I'll just demo this right now. If you do get item, you mistype it, you can, the general feedback provider will look at the commandlets you have installed and try to best fuzzy match the commandlets there. We have also published another feedback provider called the command not found feedback provider. This one is specifically for Ubuntu systems that utilize a command not found tool. This is one of the tools that if you run native commands, it will try to suggest you, oh, you can try to download this if you do sudo apt-get, so on. And so let me demo this real quick. So if I go over to my Ubuntu box and I try to say like Docker, there we go. If I run Docker, it will give me suggestions on where or how I can install it. Similarly, if I run a command like pip, you can see we have multiple feedback providers triggering here. The built-in general one that says, hey, the most similar commands you have installed are IP, zip, and pic, or PIC. And then we also have the command not found module imported that will say, hey, you can sudo apt install python 3-pip as a suggestion. So yeah, so you can use this and install this. This is available on GitHub in the gallery. It's just called the command not found, excuse me, command not found module. And you can find more information about it in the blog post I posted. You know, I do want to call out that we're still under rapid development with these. So they are under, feedback providers are behind the experimental feature flag. So they are very subject to change. And we will definitely want everyone's feedback about these. You can submit issues in the PowerShell repo. It's part of the engine. It's a brand new subsystem and interface to interact with. So if you create an issue in the GitHub repo, that's probably the best way for us to get feedback. Of course, you can also message us on Twitter or other avenues, and we can talk about it separately. Additionally, we have also published another feedback provider that we're currently calling JSON adapter feedback provider. So this is a feedback provider that is really meant to help enhance your native command experience with PowerShell. So a lot of these native command tools will just output text, and so you can't really manipulate them, work with them like they were PowerShell objects. The JSON adapter feedback provider was built upon the idea that a lot of native commands are starting to output JSON. And so we can easily type that to convert from JSON, and voila, it can be a PowerShell object. So we have created these things called adapters that you can basically parse the text output of any native command and convert it into a PowerShell object. So if you create a script that's just the name of the native command -json.ps1 and have it in your path, the JSON adapter module will check for it and then try to suggest it to you when you type that native command. To make it easier, we have also made an integration with JC. So JC, or JSON converter, is an open source tool that will automatically, has a bunch of parsers already available for a bunch of native commands. You can see the list of all the native commands that we support today, but we of course can expand this based on feedback. This is just a very early prototype. This again is also very subject to change, so there could be lots of changes coming forward. But the really cool thing about this and some of the other feedback providers we've created is some of the predictive intelligence support. So I'll just jump over quickly to a demo here. So if I do, right now I have the JSON adapter module supported. Still a little, do I have it imported? Let me see. There we go. So if I type a native command like who, you'll see that there is a suggestion or a feedback provider suggestion that says, hey, you can now do who pipe it to JC and then pipe it to convert from JSON. So as I start typing who, you'll see also the JSON adapter is plugged into the predictive IntelliSense. So now I can simply do this and get it as a JSON object. So this is kind of both a learning tool and a way you can accelerate your command line experience. The adapters experience, so let me just double check that I have some of the adapters in my path. If I do I've written a JSON adapter called vmstat. This is the same one I post in the blog. It will identify it and give it as a suggestion. So now I can do vmstat.json, and this will convert it to a JSON object too. So you can write your own, publish them as scripts, and publish them to the gallery and so on, and share them with the community. So similarly, yeah, like I said, lots of things are subject to change, but definitely would love your feedback about this stuff, and yeah, definitely give it a try. So I'll post the blog to the chat as well. Okay, and that's all I got for that. Let me check our agenda. Next thing, Sean, are you here for some docs update?
I am. Let me share my screen. It's been a busy month. We don't have a whole lot of new content to talk about. We've been doing a lot of work on updates. We updated the PowerShell 7.4 documentation for the Preview 4 release, so there's new release notes available there. Stephen has added a couple of new examples to the set PS readline option documentation, showing you how to use the history handler and the command validation handler. Those are kind of neat features that are probably underused by a lot of folks. Let me grab my notes. We've updated the .NET APIs for the PowerShell SDK. So we now have documentation here for 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4. Also did a bunch of work cleaning up this documentation is generated from the source code itself, from the / comments, and I've done a bunch of work cleaning up the / comments. So if you see errors or omissions, and those are, you need to report those in the source repo, and we can improve the documentation there. Something that we haven't talked about a lot in our docs updates is Azure PowerShell, but Azure PowerShell releases a new version virtually every month. So there's documentation updates with each new version. And I wanted to point out this article that folks may not be aware of, the upcoming breaking changes. So you can get kind of ahead of the game if you're an Azure PowerShell user and see what will be changing in future versions. And then again, talking about PS Resource Get module, we've added a new article here in the PowerShell Get documentation showing the repository configurations that we support with PS Resource Get. So, of course, continue to support the PowerShell gallery, NuGet.org. We've added support for Azure artifacts, GitHub packages, and other third-party hosting services that provide NuGet feeds. And so there's information here about what works and what doesn't. There are some limitations on what can work in these different feeds. So it's all covered here and shows you examples of how to publish to a feed, a particular feed. So let me check my list. Also updated if you are a Linux user for PowerShell. Where's my terminal? This was something that I only recently discovered myself. There's a man page for PowerShell, and the documentation here is not as complete as we would like. So I've updated that, and then the next release that will show up as updated. So that's it for the docs. The last thing I want to just throw out a shameless plug for is Mike Robbins and I will be presenting at PowerShell on the River in Chattanooga on August 11th. We're doing a half-day workshop about how to document your PowerShell script modules, generating Markdown help and publishing that Markdown help to a website, supporting the Dash Online parameters and supporting updatable help. So should be a fun session. And that's the docs update.
Awesome, thanks, Sean. Check our agenda. Steve, you have some DSC v3 updates you'd like to share?
Sure. Not like a big update, but so for those of you who are at my PS Summit session on DCV3, I made the unfortunate statement that we were going to make things public mid-June, and that was intended for this year, by the way. So that didn't happen. So we're in July. So we're currently targeting getting stuff ready to get make it more public in time for the next DSC community call, which is targeting, I believe, on August 9th. So we are actively doing some development work, and also Mikey's doing a lot of documentation work so that hopefully it gives people an opportunity to understand exactly what the differences are, how to leverage it. The key thing I want to call out here is when we do make the repo public, this is very early in development. So I don't know if the industry still calls things alpha, but that's kind of like the state we're in now. It's kind of like an alpha state where we're not feature complete. We know it's buggy. We're not asking people to open bugs. We're more trying to get early feedback on more like some of the designs and concepts, because it will be pretty different from V2 and V1. However, one of the things that I did mention at my session is that we are planning on full support on existing PowerShell-based DSC resources. So that will work. The way it works will be a little bit different, and you'll see that when the repo opens along with the documentation. What is not being carried forward is MOF-based configuration or the PowerShell scripts with the configuration keyword that generate those MOFs. Like that whole world is not being carried forward. We're moving towards JSON and YAML instead. And so these are the kind of things that we want feedback on, both for people who can author sample configurations to play with the resources we have, but also more, in this case, because it's so early on, more importantly is authoring resources in any language. Choose your favorite language, figure out how to build a resource around it, and test it with the new DC engine, and we'll love feedback on that. So again, let's say early August in time for the DC community call is what we're targeting. That's it.
Cool. Let's see what's next. Aditya, do you have some updates on 7.2, 7.3 servicing releases?
Yeah, just a quick announcement. We last Thursday we released 7.2.13 and 7.3.6 as servicing updates for both of those release trains, and they don't have big changes, but mostly they're about updating the version of .NET they're based on. So give them a try and send us feedback. Thanks.
Awesome. From there, we'll pass it over. Is Vivian here to give a update on SSH?
I'm here. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so today I'm gonna do a quick demo of a feature that we recently GA'd called Shark, which is a feature that allows Azure users to connect to their Arc machines without needing a public IP or an open port. And so for some background, an Azure Arc is a service that allows people to onboard their non-Azure machines to Azure to simplify managing hybrid environments. So, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so once you onboard a machine to Azure, you're able to manage it using the Azure control plane, just as you would be able to do it with the Azure resource and your other Azure resources. So as you can see, I onboarded a Hyper-V VM to Azure, and now I'm able to manage it, and this is how it looks like. So this feature that we worked on is about SSH into those resources without needing to expose any public IPs or open ports. And to use that, you can either use a PowerShell module, an Azure PowerShell module, or an Azure CLI extension. So yeah, I'm gonna just show how the experience goes. So, okay, so in this example here, I am SSHing into one of my Linux VMs, and I just provided the resource group, the name, and my local username. And this command is going to use the SSH client that I already have that comes installed with Windows. And it's going to connect to that machine using an Azure connectivity platform. So it won't try to connect to a public IP. It's going to use a proxy to connect via Azure to that machine. So this is how this would look like. So yeah, see, I connected to the machine, and I had a private key set up for this experience, but we do also have the option of SSH authenticating using AAD login, which is a feature that right now only works for Linux machines. But instead of trying to connect to a local user in that machine and authenticating using a key or a password or something like that, this command is going to retrieve an Azure certificate and handle the authentication itself. So to do that, the prereq is to have this AAD SSH login extension installed in your machine, and also have a specific role, virtual machine login role. And if I don't provide a local username, you log in that machine using my Azure credentials. So if I show this, I logged in using my Azure credential without having to handle any of that. So that's pretty useful. And one other feature that I think is pretty cool, and right now I'm going to show it using the PowerShell commandlet instead of the Azure CLI commandlet, it's being able to RDP to Windows machines over an SSH tunnel that goes over the connectivity platform. So yeah, since there isn't a RDP equivalent to this feature, you can just RDP over their SSH tunnel, and it's pretty cool. So this is a Windows machine that I'm trying to connect to, and I also have authentication already set up, and I just provide this RDP parameter. Yeah, and so this open an SSH tunnel, and then and now I'm able to connect to my machine via RDP without needing to expose any public IPs and open ports. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so I think that's it for the demo. We recently GA'd this experience. So if you want to give any feedback, I think best place would be either in the Azure CLI or the Azure PowerShell repos. They are open, so if you have any problems, definitely open an issue there. And yeah, if you have any questions, we'll be on the chat and we can answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Vivian. I guess the next item is to me and Cindy. So myself and Cindy had the opportunity last month to, myself, Cindy, and Andy actually, if they're on the call, had the opportunity last month to attend PowerShell conference in Europe. And we had the great opportunity to present a number of sessions, as well as the State of the Cell session and an AMA. I believe all the recordings are available on YouTube now, so in case you were curious, all the PowerShell EU conference recordings are available. Do you want to add anything about kind of our experience there, Cindy?
Sure. Yeah. So I think we, as Stephen mentioned, we just felt really lucky to get to go to Prague and attend the conference and hopefully connect with many of you that were on the call here today. I see Justin put the recordings in the chat. Thanks, Justin, for adding them as well. So definitely check those out if you weren't able to attend. But thanks to everyone who was there and reached out and got a chance to talk to us. I know I got so much out of being at the conference and just connecting with all of you and hearing your various stories of how you're using PowerShell today, whether it's from a perspective of something you're struggling with or something that's been really successful for you. I know that just had a huge impact on myself and Stephen, and we really take those stories back to the team, and it really informs our development and our energy moving forward. I guess a few things, or one thing that I would also say, is I know that kind of one of the follow-ups to PSConf EU is that they do a virtual mini-con in the fall. So that's something to look forward to if attending conferences in person isn't something that's practical for you. I'm sure our team will have a presence at the mini-con in the fall. So looking forward to that as well, and more conferences in the coming year. If you do have a user group or a conference, whether virtual or in person, and you think it would be beneficial for myself or anyone from the PowerShell team to kind of participate in that, do reach out and we will do our best to kind of like provide content or resources or attend. So just kind of want to plug that, and also remind folks that this call is also a place where you can add to the agenda publicizing any sort of PowerShell related events that you might be, community events that you might be having as well. But yeah, PowerShell Conference EU was really great. It's always a really great community event, and it was just a really great opportunity to connect with so many of you.
Awesome. Sweet. From there, Jim, are you here and ready to do a demo of your edit file?
I am.
Cool. We'll pass it over to you then.
So let's turn that on and let's share. I'll do a little sharing. So one of the things I've been kind of fiddling around with, sort of after hours, if you will, is one of the problems I have, I should mention it this way, one of the things I would like to do is I would like to include build numbers, for example, that are more dynamic in assembly builds and module builds, and I would like it to kind of track the number of commits that I've had, and that way I can kind of track exactly what I've got when things are in flux. And so I would like to update the PSD1 file and the CS_proj file for my assemblies kind of more dynamically. And I noticed that when I did all this, I would use because most of my work is done on a Mac, I would do this with Ed, which is a really horrible editor, but it works great in scripting environments. So when you need to automate something, it works really great, but you kind of have to know what you're doing. And I've noticed other people have written the same sort of code, and anybody that needs to do this essentially has written their own kind of bespoke code to update the file that they want to update. So I looked at this from a more general perspective and said, how could I create a kind of a more PowerShell view of scripted editing of a file, where I know when I have certain knowledge about the file and I know exactly kind of what I want to change. So I came up with this module that was inspired by Ed, but called edit file, strangely enough, nice and PowerShell-ish. So it allows me to do things like, let's see here, you should be able to see a screen here in just a moment. So if I go off and look at, if I go off and look at the files, and I can see that the file version on this particular assembly is 1.0.0, which isn't really great. So I would kind of like to update my file pretty easily. So I incorporated it into a build script, and the build script allows me to just run build, and it will go off and edit the two files. It'll edit my PSD1 file and edit my assembly file, and then it will. And now we can go and take a look at this again. And now we can see that this is the text utility assembly. And I've had 40 commits, and I know it's version 0.5. And the syntax that you use to kind of go through all of this is through actions. Every action is a explicit thing that edit change that you want to make. And in this particular case, if I go through here, I can kind of show you right here at the top of the screen, at the top of the window, you'll see this edit file. And I'm editing the CS proj file, and I'm going to search forward for file version. I'm going to replace digits with this new version, then I'm going to save the file. I'm also going to use backup. And there you can see that through the -back parameter in the edit file. And then I do the same thing for this, for the PSD1 file. And I've just been playing around with this idea. Is this a useful thing? So I created a discussion so we can kind of talk about it. And I am going to press that into the chat. And I'd love to have your feedback on in the discussion about it. It's there. One of the nice things about it is it works nicely. You can actually say compare file or compare text, I guess is what it is. And then we have source one, PSD1 and source Microsoft BSD1.back because I created a backup file. And you can see where I've made the little change. It's pretty subtle. It's just right there. It's just a change from what it used to be 0 and now it's 40. So anyway, I would love to get your participation in the conversation and kind of figure out whether this is something that should go forward or whether it's just a kind of a not very interesting bit of functionality. So please, if you have the time and you have the interest, please participate in that discussion.
Cool. Thanks, Jim.
That's it.
Cool. Thank you, Jim. Let's see. Ashley, are you here? You can do an introduction.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi everybody. I'm Ashley. I'm a new intern on the PowerShell team. I'm a senior at University of Maryland, and I'm kind of working on some various new research projects.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, Ashley. Ashley, was this your first community call? I think you joined back in May, but I think.
Yes, this is my first community call. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining, and yeah, we're super excited to have her on the team, and she's been doing some awesome work in some kind of new research areas that we're exploring in. Okay, from there we'll go to the comments on the issue. Actually, before we go there, is Demetrius here?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest. I think I saw him in the people list.
Yep, I just joined a couple minutes ago.
Perfect. Are you ready to give a demo on Winget Configured?
Yeah. Yeah. So, hopefully I can get my screen share to cooperate. Let me know when it's up.
We can see it.
Awesome. So these are a few of the PowerShell modules we've released to the gallery. They should all be considered in pre-release, but due to the dependency, having one pre-release take a dependency on another, we went ahead and did the client as stable, and it's being pulled in by the DSC. And then we've recently added the Winget configuration module, and that's really the one that I was going to give you a quick demo of. So with Winget configuration, we're using a declarative file to define the state we want the environment to be in. We're using DSC resources. We're using DSC v2. And under the hood, Winget is acting as a local configuration manager to sort of iterate through this configuration file, install the modules that contain the resources, and then call invoke DSC resource. And we've got two modes that we've implemented. The first one I'm going to show is invoke, which is really sort of an inline where you're going to see the output as things are happening. I've already accepted the configuration agreements. And what it's doing is it's looking to see if these resources exist. You'll notice in square brackets at the end of some of these lines, they say local, which means I've already run this configuration and pulled these resources down. If I don't have them on my system, they'll actually show that it's coming from PS Gallery or whatever other source those modules are coming from. And then you can see it's gone through and it's applied the configuration. So it's using Winget to install the yarn package or node, and then it's going in and it's using that to put in yarn, and then it's using yarn to put in the dependencies from the module, and everything's been applied. The other mode that we've got is, if you don't want to run invoke and have the output inline, you can run start, and it'll basically do the same thing, but it's running in the background. And you'll see kind of at the top in terminal, you'll see it doing some of the things with npm. That's just some of the artifacts of some of the way the output works today. But this is really a lot of the new work that we've been doing in Winget to become more of a configuration, not just a package manager, but also doing configuration management. And we've got several samples in the dev home project, and I'll show you where that is real quick in the project. Is this too small or is this big enough?
It's okay. People should be able to zoom locally on the Teams client.
Yep. So inside of DevHome, we've got these organized based on their GitHub organization and then project. And these are sample configurations. Some of them are leveraging Visual Studio's DSC resource, and they're using the .vs config file. So for some of these configurations to work, you will need to clone that project and pull it in. But there are some projects like Visual Studio Code where they've actually checked in a configuration into their project into the .configurations directory. And with PowerShell, it's either invoke Winget configuration for sort of more of that interactive view of the output, or it's start Winget configuration if you just want it to kick it off and run. A lot of these can be very long running, as you can imagine. If you're needing to download and install Visual Studio and then install workloads or extensions, there's a lot of stuff that's happening, and a lot of this is sort of performance limited based on your bandwidth and the speed of your system. But it's a very powerful set of capabilities, and the documentation for it is at Microsoft Learn. And you'll see all of this under the Winget configuration. And we've got an overview of what's happening. We've got some instructions on how to build one of these configurations and how to check that the configuration is working. And we're interactively building all of this in the COM API that Winget has. So you can either directly integrate with the COM APIs with your application. You can use the PowerShell modules that we provided, and we also have a more of sort of a Windows traditional CLI-based experience. So looking in the chat, is Winget still client OS only? Yes, right now we're only supported on the Windows client. There's been a lot of work that's in progress to make this work on Windows Server. It is technically possible to make it work on server 2019. It's fairly straightforward to get it to work on server 22, and there's a bunch of instructions out there for that. And a lot of our planning right now has been around being able to leverage the DSC module that actually contains a repair winget package manager commandlet that will install the dependencies and get everything set up so that you can have winget installed using Windows PowerShell. And then once you have the winget modules and winget installed, you can then install PowerShell 7, which right now is a prerequisite for some of the configuration things to happen. Lots of fun caveats with whether you run in user mode or administrator mode. And we're actively working with Steve and the PowerShell team to continue making improvements and figure out how we're going to reason about things like what needs to run in admin mode versus user mode. This has also been integrated into DevHome. So DevHome also exposes the same sorts of capabilities. So that was a whole bunch of buzzwords and a lot of stuff to throw out there. Any other good questions?
Demetrius, you want to throw in the chat like a link to like an issue or discussion in the Wingate repo for them to follow up if there's questions later?
Yeah, I've actually got a whole discussion section. So this link takes you directly to the category for winget configuration. You know, a lot of this is, I would say, very early bits, but we wanted to get it out and get it in people's hands. And we're actively working on the schema. So all of this is definitely preview stuff. I expect the schema is going to change and iterate, but you know, the basic building blocks of winget as a local configuration manager on the OS and leveraging PowerShell DSC, all of that is pretty much set in stone. And we're looking forward towards other enhancements with DSC v3. We want to be able to do things like use winget to iterate everything that's installed on the system, and something like reverse DSC to be able to export a configuration from an environment and then be able to use that exported configuration to apply it to other systems. Do winget packages accept parameters? So there's two mechanisms today. There's an override that will basically override all of the arguments being passed to the installer. So if you use override, you're responsible for adding things like silent and scope back in. But we've added a new argument that is custom. And what that will do is it will allow winget to basically inherit the arguments from the manifest so that you'll get your silent or your scope. And then you can just append additional arguments. So for example, if you're wanting to install Visual Studio and you're wanting winget as a package manager to add workloads, you can just pass those in as arguments on the command line. License keys, I haven't seen too many examples of applications that let you pass a license into the installer itself, but any of the ones that do that, that is a supported scenario. I think for a lot of them I've run into, it's either you need a license file, which we're working on being able to do an offline download for the store packages that will include the licenses for enterprises. So we've got that work in progress. Reasonable detection method. Can you give me a little more clarity on the context of that question? For existing software. So if you do get winget packages, it'll do the same logical thing as winget list. And what it's doing is it's looking through the registry to see all of the things that are listed that are installed on the system. And you'll notice in the output, I'll go up at the top so you can see the columns. If we see a package that's installed and we believe we have a manifest at some source, you'll see the source listed. So in this case, most of these are from winget. This one's from the store. If there's an update that's available, then you'll see something in the available column. When you're talking about software that doesn't show up in the add or remove programs, there's a few cases of those, and you're likely to see something like this, where it's probably the product code or the upgrade code, depending on what we've got. There's a few examples for some of the MSIX packages where you'll see, something like this at the end of it if it came from the Microsoft Store, or potentially the package family name for other packaged applications that were installed via MSIX. And definitely we're looking for lots of feedback here. It's pretty tough to do things like reason about pinning. There's not a verb for pin. So we were looking at limit when get package, and we were looking at a couple of things to figure out what makes sense there. We're building a lot of the new functionality in the COM API, and we still have a couple of things like managing sources that need to be moved into the COM API. So for those, the commandlets are basically a crescendo style wrapper on top of the CLI command. And then once we finish the rest of that, the goal is to get parity for all of the rest of the capabilities in WinGet through PowerShell. And we're definitely looking for feedback on sort of the right nouns and verbs for being able to do that, to make it as, as idiomatically correct as we can, or as PowerShell-y as possible. And then once we get to the point where we have parity, we'll go ahead and make the module a stable, fully supported PowerShell module. And then from that point going forward, any new features that get implemented will be in all three places: the COM API, the CLI, and the PowerShell module. Question on non-MSIX packages and delivery optimization. We've implemented delivery optimization as the default downloader right now. If that's not working due to policy, you can switch it to WinINet. The peer-to-peer capability is what most people are looking for when they mention delivery optimization. That's available for anything that's distributed through the Microsoft Store that's a packaged application, but not the Win32s, because those are coming from the publisher's CDN themselves. We are working with Intune and the delivery optimization team to figure out how we can enable delivery optimization for any of the packages. But that may require Intune licensing to be able to take advantage of that, because of the requirements for the PHF file that is the hash of hashes. And there's also a restriction on that first install, where if the server doesn't support the range requests through their HTTP server, then it doesn't work in that case until it's been pulled into the enterprise store and the hash file has been generated and Intune has been made aware.
Hey, Demetrius, in the interest of time, because I think we do have a few other items, do you mind answering the questions in the chat, and then we can maybe cover some of the other topics I think we still have remaining. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
All right. So Stephen, I'm going to skip to the next item real quick, which is working group updates.
Yeah, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't believe we have every representation from working groups on the call today. I would be very surprised. So I think maybe we can more formalize what we're going to cover for next community call. Trying to kind of coordinate this across all the working groups where we have global representation has proven to be a little bit difficult. But I think some of the themes that have come up is, making some of the discussions and stuff like that more transparent, some of the priorities, how to expose more priorities on what issues and PRs get reviewed and things like that. Those are all great suggestions. So I'm going to carry those to the working groups. Separately, I'll mention that, one of the things I've been trying to organize, and again, has been proved a little bit difficult, is like what we're calling a working group day. So trying to get all of the, as many of the members as possible. And keep in mind, a lot of the members are volunteers, right? So we got to respect their availability and their time zones. Just discussing some of the logistics and some of the things that have worked, some of the things that need improvement. And I'll just put one last thing out there. If there's any community members who feel like they can provide value as a member of the working group, feel free to reach out to me. It is ultimately up to the individual working group whether to accept a new member, but we're always looking for more community contributions. So I guess I'll leave that as it for now. I just realized my camera wasn't on, but sorry.
Cool. Well, I think that's the end of our main agenda. We do have a community demo from Justin. Justin, are you ready to demo some of the VS Code, Pester VS Code extension stuff? You're on mute.
There we go. Thank you for catching that. Yes, I can. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. Should be able to see that okay? Can you see that there?
Yeah,
Steven?
it's reasonable for me. I have a big monitor.
Okay.
Maybe increase it slightly.
Yeah, maybe
Okay, I thought that was pretty big as is.
Times.
I can bounce a little bit more there.
There we go.
All right, so my name is Justin Grody. I work on the Pester test extension, which is just a VS Code extension that allows you to run Pester tests inside of VS Code. Had a chance to work on this a bit more after a bit of a hiatus and to get stuck on other things. So I've been able to make a lot of improvements and tweaks, and just wanted to go over a few of those real quick if you haven't looked at it lately. One thing I can recommend is when you go to install the extension, there's a button here to switch to pre-release version. So you're on the pre-release. That'll get you the latest and greatest, but even the release version has some new stuff in it. So the Pester test extension allows you to run Pester tests. Here I have a bunch of different Pester tests over here. And when you have the extension installed, you'll have this new little icon for testing. And so when you go to any individual test or you go to that icon, it will automatically go through and discover all the tests that are in your environment. So here I have these, and you'll start getting these little icons on the side for your different tests. So a couple things that are new is that the logging has been much improved. So if you go here to Pester, as you go through and run things, like run a test, you'll get a lot more info about what's going on. And this integrates with the VS Code set log level option. So if you choose this, if you set it to trace or debug, or you can specifically go to the Pester extension and set its debug level the same, you go up to trace and then do this again, you will get a lot more information about what's going on. So this will be a lot easier to troubleshoot if there's issues occurring, that kind of thing. Another thing that has been added is we've added Mac, Linux, code spaces support. This is more fixing a bug than adding support, but now basically I'm actually running this in code spaces. This is running in a GitHub code space, and all my tests and everything work fine. So if you tried this before and it didn't work on Mac, Linux, etc., those should now be working just fine. Some additional integrations that have been tied in from the API that's exposed is we now have a refresh button here. So if you click this refresh button, this will actually cancel out your current test run. I'm just going to shrink this just a little bit. This will cancel out if you have like a run going. All tests are also now cancelable, so you can hit this stop, and that'll actually stop it and clean everything up. And if you if your test for whatever reason gets stuck, or you're doing any kind of like assembly testing where you need to reset the environment, this reset button will go ahead and bounce the PowerShell process that's being used to run your tests and kind of get everything back to a clean version again. Finally, an additional item here is that we now have the ability to auto-run tests. Before, that was a button down here with Pester that was just sort of enabled on a global basis. A API was added to VS Code to do this. They're called continuous run tests. So now each test now has this little eyeball next to it. And so if you click that little eyeball and you go through and you edit the test and hit save, it will automatically rerun that test as you go. So as you're going, you can write your tests, and every time you save that test, you'll be able to see the updates. So here's a test that's a real simple one. So this true should be true. I make this to false should be true. As soon as I hit save, it reran the test. I get this here. Of course, it doesn't like me now. Let's try a different one. Oh, it's because I'm running the wrong test. I'm just running true is true. So if I watch that test, change this back to true should be true, you'll see it goes green. And then if I do it to false should be true, and I'm just hitting Control-S to save, you immediately get feedback that this test failed, as well as what was expected, as well as what happened. So those are sort of the main new features. Lots more coming along the way. But yeah, if you haven't used the Pester test extension recently and you like to do Pester tests, it can be a real handy help for developing tests faster and more efficient. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
Justin. A quick question on your extension. Does it require a specific version of Pester?
It does require Pester 5 and above. It does not have Pester 4 support. The main reason for actually requires specifically 5.2, and the reason for that being is that an API was added to Pester to make all of this work a lot better, so that as the tests all show up in like real time, you don't have to run it and wait for all the tests to get started and then have it show the results at the end. The fact that everything happens in real time as things happen is due to that sort of streaming API that's available. So it does require Pester 5.2 or later, and it should warn you if you don't have it. So. All right, so again, at the end of time, if there's any further questions about it, I'll answer those in chat. Otherwise, thanks again.
Awesome, thanks, Justin. We got a couple minutes left for our community calls, so we'll open it up to kind of any general questions for any of the things we've covered in the meeting today. I know it was a lot, so always feel free to follow up either next community call or on our GitHub, Twitter, wherever you can reach us. But I'll just pause for a moment if anyone has any questions, or maybe they have a quick demo they'd like to show off too for the last minute or so.
Looks like Marvin has their hand raised.
Yeah.
So I just have a quick question to loop back on the DSC stuff. So DSC version 2. My understanding is, let me ask this first, right? So the YAML-based stuff is just strictly DSC 3, correct? Is that what I heard?
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
All right. And then is this all still just private right
As
now?
of this moment, it is. We expect our target, and I'm much more confident about this than the last target I gave, is before the next DSC community call, which is on August 9th, we're planning on making the repo public.
Okay. And then so with the DSC 3 stuff, because I noticed primarily in DSC version 2, it's probably the same thing as 3, but it's mostly meant to be used with the Azure machine configuration. Is it the same? Is it the same will be the true of DSC 3?
No, so the way to think about it is DSCV3 itself is going to be a general platform for configuration as code. So, we're going to have partners like Winget, and of course, we'll have partners like Azure Machine Config, so that they can be used within Azure. But the DSCV3 platform itself is going to support Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and expected to be used locally. So if you want to have features like wide deployment, detecting drift and all that, you need something higher level, and that thing right now is probably going to be Azure Machine Config.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the last minute or so?
One last thing I would say before we end today too. I will always say this, but just another reminder for like any topics, requests, or community demos are always appreciated. I think it's really great when we have other internal partners too, like Demetrius, who come and present as well. If you do have specific other like Microsoft product groups that you would be really interested in us inviting to the call too, that's also an option. So we also would like take requests or topics like that, obviously related to PowerShell in some way, but that's an option as well.
Let me ask Gail this question since he posted it in the chat. Are you saying that you're going to update it, or do you need me to do some sort of work here? Okay, good. Yes, so plan that I'll probably need 15 minutes to talk about V3 at the next community call.
Cool. If there's nothing else, I think it looks like we're right at time. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming to the July PowerShell community call. Great discussions going on in chat I'm seeing, and thanks again for joining. We'll see everyone next month.